Hey, everybody, it is I, Eugene Clark, your host today for that ever popular video podcast, Save World Make Art, and my co-host and artist extraordinaire, Mr. Matt Faulkner.
Thank you. Thank you. Thank you. Hello, Eugene.
How are you feeling on this Friday, TGIF?
I'm doing good. I'm doing good today. I'm happy to be here.
You told me that you were already out on an extraneous walk.
I don't know that I use the word extraneous because it wasn't.
Were there any cookies, scones, or donuts involved?
In my dreams, no, there were no.
I like walking like you do. I don't do it enough. I'm sure you do it way more than I do, and rightfully so. But for some reason, whenever I get out there to just do a walk, it always has to include something like cookies or donuts, coffee,
Yeah, what's the
ice
purpose?
cream.
Why walk? I mean, it's not healthy.
Why does it have to include all that?
Yeah, if it doesn't include a donut, why walk? I mean, because we all know that walking is not healthy for you. And donuts are. So I don't know. I felt like being, unhealthy, go for a walk. And yeah, I feel worse. So that's always a good thing. Hey, we got something interesting to talk about today.
Good.
And I even have visuals.
Ooh,
Visuals.
we always appreciate the visuals.
Yeah. So I'm going to share the screen. And can you introduce what we're going to do? You know what we're going to do while I share the screen?
Yeah. I think when we're talking about our artwork, and especially right now, because you and I are involved at the Entertainment Arts Department at the College for Creative Studies, you specifically are working with concept art students. So when you're thinking about concept art, we're thinking about our point of view. And when we say our point of view, we're talking about the artist's point of view of this imaginative world and character that also leads to the storyline and helps us to create spaces, places, and help the viewer to navigate through the concept that you are developing through these characters. So if we're going to explore points of view, that's what we're going to be talking about today through your wonderful hard work and effort of a PowerPoint.
Awesome. Thank you, Eugene. So today, what we're going to talk about is, it dawned on me. I shared this actually with my CCS College for Creative Studies students yesterday, and Eugene and I had been talking about this mural, Diego Rivera's Detroit Industry Murals, for quite some time. They're here, and we often go to the DIA, and you see them. I mean, they're just overwhelming to go into the garden court, they call it, and to be surrounded by his work. So also with the idea that there's a possibility for a rail strike, and the idea of unions has become something that people have been kicking around, like maybe unions are bad, or maybe it's communist or whatever. And so when you look at these murals, all of a sudden you realize, wow, these murals aren't just about the beautiful imagery and his rendering. He's talking about something, and it's really fascinating to unravel the story of him coming to Detroit, what was going on when he got to Detroit, and so I'm just going to share some of that stuff, and we're going to talk about it. And Eugene, you just shout out anytime I'm moving too fast through imagery.
You got it.
And please, I want to hear your point of view. And we also want to hear people's points of view in the comments. So if you have thoughts about this, please share them. So moving into this, the guy that actually hired Diego Rivera, the painter, he is Mexican. was not Henry Ford. This is Hank Ford over here. It was his son, Edsel Ford. And
Oh, good old Edsel, named after a car.
yeah, yeah, something like that. and and the thing was also he was brought here by the suggestion of the DIA's art director, William Valentiner. So what I imagine happening is that the Ford family had, bundles of money, and they're like, well, we like to be, beneficent and build up our community. So let's hire somebody to come in and make a painting in the DIA. The DIA, I think, had opened just actually back in like 1925. It's not that old.
Wow.
Yeah. And so at that point, it was only a few years old. So they decided, let's put some money up to do this. And they went to the people at the DIA and they said to Mr. Valentiner, or if I hope that's how you pronounce his name, here, let's hire somebody. And I imagine that Valentiner said, yeah, let's hire Diego Rivera. He's a prominent muralist in the world right now. It'd be an honor to have him. Oh, okay. So they did. So he was commissioned to paint what was called the Garden Court at that time. It's in the center of the building, and he was paid $10,000. And by the end, actually, that had been doubled to $20,000.
Oh, wow.
Now, here's the thing that was really interesting to me, and what I was talking to our college students about is, what does point of view mean? A lot of times for artists, point of view simply means, where's the camera? Is the camera a ant's eye view, or is it a bird's eye view, or is it a locked off camera? Is it moving around? What is the point of view of the viewer and the person who makes the work? But actually, point of view has to also be about, if it's a camera angle, it has to have meaning. Why are you putting the camera angle there? And what does it mean that the camera angle is up above or down below? And so then it leads us into talking about, what is our intention when we tell a story visually? Whose point of view are we sharing, and why? So that's what the conversation was. And this is what really gets interesting to me, is his only guideline. This must have been, I learned this on the internet, so it must be true, but it says that his only guideline, or what was in the contract, was that he must relate the history of Detroit to the development of industry. So we got to remember that line right there, because what do you think, Eugene? Is that kind of an open-ended mural contract right there?
And
Would you be
he,
happy to get that kind of contract?
oh, yeah. Well, I feel like right now at the Detroit Zoo, I go and do these chalk art murals. And this last particular one, sometimes they're really specific, but this last particular one, because it's for the wild lights, where they have these animal themed Christmas lights on display, and they have this little warming tent, and they wanted it to feel like a lodge setting. And that's all they said. They said, just make it lodgy, ski, lodgy, that sort of thing. And I'm like, really? That's all you're telling me? So I just had carte blanche to figure that out, and I came up with something fun, and I enjoyed doing it. But yeah, to get a guideline like that, being Diego Rivera in the art museum at that point in our city's history, was quite unimaginable.
Yeah, yeah. It can be right. It can be both a scary and also a really. I can be scared about that kind of no limitations, but I can also be excited by it.
Right.
Right. So, okay, his making the mural. Then it's good to talk about what was going on at that time. The 1929 stock market crash had happened 3 years earlier, and so we were in the midst of. He was hired to paint the mural in 1932. Now, here's just one number from the Great Depression, the stock market crash. During 1933, around $140 billion worth of bank deposits were lost due to bank failures.
Damn.
Now, that's 140 billion 1933 dollars.
Sure. So if you equate that to, what that might be worth today, that's in the trillions.
It's when I first read that, I was like, well, that must be millions. No, it was billions. So,
Wow.
Essentially what that means to everybody is that everybody lost everything.
Yeah.
I remember I heard stories from my family. My mother disagreed with my father about it, but she wasn't there. Apparently my dad said that when his father would go out to find a job in the morning, we grew up outside of Boston, he would bring a lunch with him. And if he didn't get a job when he got home, that lunch was his family's dinner.
Oh gosh.
Right.
Yeah.
So, I mean, I don't think that, like these are extremes. I don't think that my family necessarily looked like this, although I don't know, people were hungry. This is how bad it was. And
Yes.
so when he got there, this is Diego and his wife, Freda. There was already this atmosphere of what could be called and was called then, it was the beginnings of what was called America First. That we've heard that lately too with our
Yeah.
former president, right? Which it really what it boils down to is nationalism. We, us, I, me, mine. And so when people saw that Diego Rivera had been hired to come and paint in the heart of American industry, the first thing they said was, he's a Mexican. That's not right. He's a foreigner.
Yeah.
We don't want him here. The next thing was, he was also a communist. He believed in Marxism. And so this right up front unsettled people, and there were complaints about him being there. Now, here's the other thing. A week before he arrived, a march was made, decide to happen from the center of Detroit through into Dearborn and then over to the Ford Rouge River plant. It was
Right.
called the Hunger March. And it was people protesting that, the big three automotive companies were still making great profits. They'd lost money, but they were, millions and millions, and people were starving. And so what happened was, when they started out of Detroit, when they got to the border of Dearborn, Dearborn's mayor, Clyde Ford, who just happened to be Henry's cousin, called out
Oh.
the police and the military police, and they fired into the crowd and killed one person.
Oh boy.
When they got to the River Rouge plant, Henry Ford, then called out his company security force, who brought to bear with, you can see these batons. I'm not sure if this is Dearborn or the Rouge plant, but it was somewhere along the march. And they hit the people also. It was a very cold day in March, and they hit them with water from fire department hoses. And then they fired into them with automatic machine guns, killing, I think, 5 more people.
Whoa.
Eventually, this was called the Ford Massacre.
Dang.
And that is the atmosphere in which Diego Rivera started to paint his murals. We got to remember, too, his only guideline was to relate the history of Detroit to the development of industry. So where do you think, so if this is his frame of mind, right, as he's starting the murals,
Yeah.
do you think he, well, I mean, do you think he maybe felt a little threatened?
Well, one thing we know that we don't want to leave out is the fact that they didn't ask him to paint the entire room as we know it today. They asked him to paint one wall or part of a wall, and it branched into and gradually became this monumental thing that it is today. And part of that was because of his foresight to understand that, by him convincing them to allow him more space, he could literally sort of take that open-ended topic relating the history of the city of Detroit. He could take that and he could do something with it. I mean, if you have such a small space in just one little area, it would never have the impact that it has today. So bravo to this man for not taking, he wouldn't take no for an answer.
Yeah. And I didn't know that. Thank you for sharing that it started off as one wall. Because, I mean, here's one of the other things. When we're creating things, we are part of the painting. Our experience is what we're sharing. And so Freda had a miscarriage while she was in Detroit with him.
Oh my God.
And that is why he painted this fetus.
Wow.
Because she had the miscarriage while he was painting it.
Yeah.
And that he did have direction. He had decided that he was, he gave himself this direction of, okay, there's going to be four um, intentions for each wall, one of the walls. New beginnings on the east wall, darkness in the interior of things on the north wall, light and the exterior of things on the south wall, and then endings and last judgments, bombs and airplanes
Wow.
on the west wall. Pretty
Man.
amazing. Um,
But what about the part of his painting that sort of touched on vaccinations?
actually, I'm gonna show that in a second.
Okay.
Um, one of the things too, though, was that he was trying to show. See, he visited with the poor of Detroit and the workers of Detroit. He went to their homes and their neighborhoods, and he saw that this was a pretty diverse place. And he decided to represent that by showing that the four races, red, black, yellow, and white, would be represented by ores, metals. Red was iron ore. Black people were, I believe they were diamonds. Asian people were sand, and white people were limestone.
Hmm.
The other thing was he wove into this lots of different um, items from his culture. So this may look like the stamping machine in the River Rouge plant, and it is. But actually, when he saw that, he thought that that was actually, it looked a lot like the goddess Coatlicue. I hope I'm pronouncing it, which was the goddess of, I believe, kind of like Kali in Indian culture, I think, about destruction and rebirth. But it's when they unearthed the sculpture for Coatlicue in the 1800s, it caused, they believe, unearthing it, earthquakes and I believe like pandemics. They were so
Wow.
frightened of it. It had actually been found in the 1700s, and they reburied it. They were so frightened of it and its power.
Oh, crazy.
So when they dug it back up, they decided, we can handle this. And then what do you know? We can't. So this is actually his representation of Coatlicue.
That's so cool.
Yeah. Now, you
Now it
asked.
also looks like that image also reminds me of the current Hollywood blockbuster series Transformers.
Mm, yeah, yeah, yeah,
Like when we see something like that, I think that's what our mind goes to.
yeah,
But I love the connection to the ancient artifacts.
yeah. To his culture, A couple other things, and then I'm going to get to that the vaccine. Um, my students, one of the things when they saw it, they right away noticed these people in hazmat suits. This is them. In Here's one of the things it suggested that actually Ford was developing acid bombs or chemical warfare in his plant. So I'm not sure that they wanted to see this in their mural that they paid for, but he put it in there anyways. That's my conjecture. Maybe that's what it's been called online, is that they were building chemical bombs, acid bombs. Another thing is that this is him. He put a self-portrait in amongst the men who are green. When you look at the mural, these guys are all green because they're working with formaldehyde without any protection, and their
Wow.
skin actually turned green.
Oh my God.
And then lastly, this was the image you brought up, the image of what was called the nativity scene. This one really created a lot of angst and unhappiness amongst the church. When he was finished, they invited church members to come in, the hierarchy, I imagine, of the church in Detroit. And I'm thinking primarily the Catholic Church. And they were pissed off that he had made this vernacular kind of nativity scene. Also, they didn't like that the woman who was playing Mary was actually, I forget her name, but she was actually a portrait of her. Maybe it was Greta, somebody of a movie star.
Oh
So he
wow.
used her image. And this is a vaccine. These animals are the vaccines are made from these animals, horses, cows, and sheep at the time. You know, like if you had if you wanted to fight against chicken pox, you would have a chicken vaccine. It was made out of eggs.
Oh,
So the same thing. And then these three guys back here were supposed to be the three kings.
wow.
So I think I'm freezing up. Okay. So that's what you were mentioning. You see what I'm saying here?
Yeah, well, I think that when you involve the church and the religious sort of undertones of sort of bringing to light these vaccines that were now part of our everyday life, I think people would misconstrue what he was saying here as being very sacrilegious.
Right. But he was pushing the edges of the envelope, you know? I mean, and that's that. I imagine that's what he would see his job too. You know what I'm saying?
Yeah.
But I could see why they would be like, oh my God, how dare you put Jean? Oh, that was her name, Jean Harlow. I think that's her name, the movie star who plays Mother Mary. Like, how could you put Jean Harlow as Mother Mary? That's disgusting, you know, or whatever.
Yeah. So were they more up in arms about that than the fact that he was showing like a so-called Christ child as receiving a vaccination?
I don't know the you know, the details of it. They were also, I mean, I imagine that's part of it, don't you think? But they were also irritated that he was showing nudes. These were
Oh
all,
yeah.
oh my God, Jesus, how could
Well,
we?
and the funny thing is, like the majority of the art museum, if you look at the work that's in there, the majority of it is all nudes and was already there, established as a permanent collection before he came along and painted these so-called nudes.
Yeah. So I mean, you know, it was selective, and you know, people are hungry, they're angry, they were looking for something to hang their anger on,
Right.
and this is so here's one of the things too in regard to the mural. There's a painting of Henry Ford, and it's stuck down in one corner, and I can't help but wonder, like, what was he thinking? This is all right. So here is the portrait of Edsel and Mr. Valentiner, the art director for the DIA. So there's Edsel on the left. That looks like a nice portrait, don't you think? I mean, I wouldn't mind being portrayed that way. Do you think Henry Ford was happy about this? I don't.
He had to have been ecstatic.
Yeah, I think what do you think was Diego in his head painting his patron like this? You
Yeah,
know,
well, we know it wasn't like it wasn't ponies and rainbows. That wasn't in his head.
so I brought this up with the students too. The tradition with painters for centuries was that you do your best to make your patron, the person who is paying you, look like a saint, you know? And now this is not a great, doesn't look like they made him the handsomest of man. It's Lorenzo de Medici. But when Michelangelo sculpted him, this is Lorenzo de Medici's tomb, and Michelangelo sculpted these figures. That's supposed to be Lorenzo up there. And he did not make him look like this. He made him look like a Roman warrior god from my perspective, right? And that was what we were supposed to do. So when Henry said, okay, I'm going to come in and look at the murals now, and I've been told that he's made a nice picture of me too. What do you think his response was to that?
Do you
You know?
think he wanted to destroy it?
Well, that's the thing too, is when you look at this, there's so many things in here that talk about the abuse of workers, industry taking advantage of human effort for a select few's gain. I see a Marxist communist point of view, but it's just a humanist point of view. These people are suffering, and somebody's making a lot of money off of it.
Yeah.
That's what I see in the murals, at least part of them. And my question is, well, first and foremost, you alluded to it. When the murals were done, you know the history of this, right, Eugene? What was the response?
Yeah, well, it wasn't very positive. People wanted this to be taken down.
The word whitewash was used. They
Yeah,
wanted to
people.
return the walls to white.
Yep.
That was the response. And it wasn't until Edsel Ford decided to, I'm not sure how he did it, but whether he gave more money, but he officially said, we accept and acknowledge this as a great work, that all of a sudden everybody was like, oh, okay, we'll leave it alone.
Well, only a person like him would be able to, you know, deem that uh, statement and have any sort of impact in which this thing would then survive all these years. So you got to imagine like what was going on in his head or at his home when this uproar was happening, to give him that foresight to say that this is an important painting. I mean, his dad was being depicted as a curmudgeon.
Yeah. And a killer.
Yeah. So we don't really know the trueness of how he came to be able to make that statement, but it stuck.
And to me too, what I brought up with the students is, I'm not sure to what degree what uh, Diego painted. Well, I mean, it's really obvious. I mean, he was influenced by what was going on in Detroit. But the question is, to me, how did he feel? What was going on for him as he was painting these things? Was he anxious? His wife had a miscarriage. Did that have anything to do with any kind of atmosphere of fear in trying to paint these things? I mean,
Yeah.
Henry Ford fired into his own employees with submachine guns. That must have sat on Diego's mind while he was making paintings for the mural.
I think we've talked about this. You know, there has to come to a point as an artist where the message is more important to get out than even your livelihood.
Yeah. But then they doubled his income. They ended up paying him 20 grand. And I'm getting now, see, I didn't know this, that he was only supposed to paint one wall. When he must at some point have said, this is coming along well. I'd like to paint more than just one wall.
Yeah.
Well, we don't want to give you any more money. Well, I'd like more money. Okay, we'll give you we'll double what you were paid. I mean, that 10 grand
Wow.
was a big chunk of money in 1932. And 20 grand was twice that. So anyway, we have now spoken for over 25 minutes, Eugene. And so
Wow.
what do you think? Did we do anything else you want to consider regarding this whole situation?
You've said it so well, Mr. Faulkner. I think people should get out there to the Detroit Institute of Arts and see this work.
Yeah. It is something that has over the years as I've gone there, just my own personal experience. I mean, whatever that means, I'm more and more blown away by it. I'm
Yeah. I don't think that when people first see it, they recognize necessarily uh, the whole notion of just how impactful this piece has been. And also, I don't think that the museum itself has fully understood that, even till to today, because I think that the longer it's up, the more impactful it becomes because of history, continuing, and how the subject matter is still relative to this very moment. So, you know, we're always going to be able to look at this and find something new to relate to where we are in our current situation.
Yeah.
One last thing is in this photo, you can see that there are some lines on the lower portion of the wall where Diego's sitting. And then above him is this finished portion of the painting. He was working in fresco, which is painting on wet plaster. And the plaster has to be applied to the wall prior to him painting, but he only has a certain amount of time before the pigment that he's using will just flake off if it doesn't bond with the plaster material. So it was a very difficult medium. You don't see it done or used very much today, but that also plays a big role in the importance of this piece.
That's pretty amazing. And look how big a chunk of wet plaster he's working on.
Yeah. Yeah. And he did it in odd shapes so that when you go and see this in person, you can't really see the sections, the lines where they join, because the shape is very strange. You can see it's unorthodox shape, so that yeah, those sections don't stand out individually. It looks like just one big piece.
Huh. That's really interesting. Well,
Makes you want to go and do a fresco.
yeah, I mean, wow. Anyway, that's all I got to say about it. I'm done. That's as much as I can say.
All right.
So, uh, Eugene, could you take us out with a song?
Yes, I sure will.
Thank you, everybody. Please comment in our comment section.
I lost the chord.
No, no, you didn't.
Yay! You
Well,
know,
thank you for
gotta
that
live perfect
beautiful
in the
piece.
you know what I'm saying?
I also
Thank
want
you, Mr.
to,
Faulkner.
yeah,
We appreciate everything. And what do you want to say in closing?
I want to acknowledge that it was a year ago, a couple days ago, that the 4 children were killed in Oxford, and we as adults have yet to come to an understanding of what we need to do in order to protect our children, from my perspective. And blessings to the families of all those involved, all through Oxford, and the families of those children killed, and those injured, and everybody in Oxford.
We thank you as a citizen of the city, having gone through that whole horrible tragedy with my family. It's most appreciated to hear those words from you, our neighbor in Lake Orion, close by, not untouched by such tragic moments because of being right next to us and knowing as friends what my family's endured just as one family unit in this large community of families that were all impacted. And we just have to as you said, kind of stay focused on the safety of the kids and let that be the underlying component that helps drive us to a viable solution where we won't have to endure these types of things any longer.
Yeah. Thank you, Eugene.
Thanks, Mr. Faulkner. And thank you out there watching our video podcast today. And please feel free to join our YouTube channel so that as we implement new podcasts, you will be notified, and then you can keep up with all of our good stuff that we talk about. Everything art. Send us a message, and our contact info is right there on the YouTube channel. and let us know what you would like us to talk about, because we're always interested in exploring all avenues of anything and everything art. So for me, Eugene Clark.
And for me, Matt Faulkner, get out there, save the world, yours, theirs, who's ever, and make some art.
Make some art, people.
And
Bye-bye, everybody.
Eugene, we didn't get a good close up of you playing the guitar and the harmonica. Could you do that? Lead us out with your music.
Yes,
This is an original Eugene Clark piece
that's
work,
right. And if I could just play the correct chord at the very end, it would, oh, and if I wear my harmonica the right way, that would make it, can you imagine, like, if that's how I was busking, I probably would get 0 tips. Zero
Awesome,
tips.
awesome, awesome.
And I also dropped my pick in the middle of playing. So it all went very
Yeah,
well.
yeah, yeah. Bye, everybody. Thank you for being here. Bye bye. Bye.